Welcome back to America's Fractured Politics. Donald Trump suffered a calamitous month on every imaginable front, but it is in the federal courts where his losses are most pronounced, and where many of these defeats are likely to stick. From contempt threats against former Trump officials, to stunning rebukes of Republican voter suppression, to the exposed rot within the DOJ, the tide of jurisprudence has decisively turned against the Trump machine. This episode will unpack recent developments in courtrooms across the country, what they portend for Trump's future, and how they signal a growing shift in the country's balance of power. Start with a simple premise. Donald Trump and his administration, current and former, are losing. The veneer of invincibility is shattered under a relentless barrage of judicial scrutiny. Court after court, bench after bench, ruling after ruling, the legal brickwork that held his project together is being dismantled before the public's eyes. It isn't just that Trump lost some cases, it's the scope, scale, and substance of these losses that matter. For anyone who lived through the long years of Trumpian impunity, this is a critical inflection point for American law, governance, and the future of executive power. Let's begin with U.S. District Judge James Boasberg, whose patience has finally run dry. Boasberg presided over the de facto deportation by Trump administration officials of migrants to El Salvador under the pretext of national security, all in open defiance of his judicial order. The administration was told plainly, turn the planes around and return the migrants. Instead, they brazenly lied that doing so was impossible and continued flouting the court's authority. Boasberg's response was uncompromising. He moved to initiate criminal contempt proceedings, making clear the jail sentence for those responsible were now on the table. What sets this apart are the details the judge offered about repeated lies and documented internal memos revealing officials had coordinated a false response to avoid the court's direct orders. Federal judges historically use contempt proceedings only in egregious cases, and only after every warning has been ignored. Boasberg's ruling is a thunderclap reminder that breathtaking executive audacity will be met with tangible personal consequences. Boasberg's looming contempt orders represent more than a procedural footnote. They are a test of judicial power itself. Here the principle is clear. Even the most senior officials, carrying out policies driven by a president's will, are not immune from punishment when they treat court orders as inconveniences. America's constitutional machinery, long dormant, seems to be sparking back to life. Texas's Republican leadership had a plan. Use the 2025 redistricting cycle to squeeze Black and Latino voters into as few districts as possible, diluting their voting power and manufacturing 5 new safe Republican seats. A federal court issued a thorough injunction blocking the new maps after examining legislative records, statistical evidence of packing, and explicit communications targeting minority voters. The court's opinion listed instances where predominantly Black and Latino precincts were split or forced into districts designed to nullify their impact, with lawmakers openly discussing how best to achieve this. The opinion cited violations of both the Equal Protection Clause and the Voting Rights Act, referring to Texas's plan as a quote-unquote purposeful dismantling of minority voting representation. Why such a strong decision? The court's opinion left no doubt. Texas's scheme, it found, was engineered to purposely dismantle districts where Black and brown voters together are a majority of voters. The violation was both clear and egregious, a direct assault on both the Constitution and the Voting Rights Act. The maps, far from being blind to race, as their defenders claimed, were a masterclass in discriminatory design. Claims that the intent was merely partisan rather than racial rang hollow in the face of statistical realities and legislative history. The court explicitly cited expert witness testimony in a legislative paper trail showing the mechanics of discrimination, making this injunction unusually robust against appeal. This decision has reverberations far beyond Texas. Not only does it shut down the immediate power grab, it reaffirms judicial oversight of states' most blatant attempts to entrench white political dominance under the banner of partisanship. This time the court refused to credit flimsy excuses, and this ruling, thanks to its thorough documentation of discriminatory intent and effect, stands as a strong chance of being upheld on appeal. If the situation in Texas is a case study in state-level corruption, the ongoing Comey hearing has turned into an existential embarrassment for the nation's top law enforcement agency. In shocking testimony, it emerged that a grand jury indictment had been altered, tampered with, then signed off by the foreman and another juror. A Department of Justice spokesperson issued a categorical denial, then was forced to walk back those claims when confronted with documented proof. Veteran DOJ prosecutors had in fact declined prosecution, a detail the department tried to bury. Even worse, the DOJ's own lead attorney, Lindsay Halligan, was exposed as completely unqualified for her role. Halligan specialized in insurance law, not criminal prosecution, and her sideline into federal criminal cases appeared to be a favor to Trump loyalists rather than a reflection of merit or experience. Such an appointment is not just a mistake, it's an affront to the integrity of the justice system. Now disqualification or even disbarment for Halligan is under discussion, a humiliating coda to a fiasco defined by broken rules, manufactured evidence, and total administrative chaos. This is symptomatic of a deeper rot. The law under Trump is whatever suits his interests, not the product of stable, apolitical principle. For both Trump and similar figures like Texas Governor Greg Abbott, the only constants are loyalty, lying, and a willingness to trample norms. Countless other federal court rulings showcase just how widespread these defeats have become. In 2025 alone, Trump's administration faced 530 lawsuits, by far the highest in modern history. Of the cases adjudicated so far, about three-quarters have produced losses for the administration. These losses are not only frequent, they are bipartisan. Both Republican and Democratic-appointed judges have ruled against Trump at striking rates, rejecting agency actions that violated statutory and constitutional boundaries. In lower courts, analysis shows a loss rate of about 93 to 96% on agency action cases, often for failing to follow the required process, for acting arbitrarily and capriciously, or for attempting to gut protections without proper justification. Major topics include unlawful rollback of equal pay protections, illegal delays of e-cigarette regulation, weakening nutrition standards for school meals, and attempts to cut off grants for teen pregnancy prevention programs. In each case, courts cited the Administrative Procedures Act, demanding a transparent, reasoned explanation. Trump's agents failed to deliver, resulting in court-ordered reversals and, in some cases, forced reinstatement of programs. Tariff and trade actions fared no better, with federal circuit courts finding that the administration exceeded its statutory powers. The use of emergency statutes to justify sweeping tariffs was struck down, and courts documented economic harm and a lack of credible national security grounds. These decisions have not only blocked Trump's attempted expansions of executive authority, but forced public agencies to re-implement programs previously targeted for elimination. The judiciary's response is not just a temporary fluke. It speaks to a deeper conflict playing out in American governance, an aggressive, self-enriching executive agenda versus a legal order, still holding at least in the lower courts, that values constitutional limits and the rule of law. The picture emerging is not one of a country sleepwalking toward authoritarianism, but rather a system that, however slowly and painfully, is capable of fighting back. Of course, there remains a wild card. At the Supreme Court level, political calculations regularly intrude. Recent data indicate that the court issued about 6 major rulings on Trump administration actions, with 4 decisions supporting the administration and 2 opposing it. Supreme Court decisions this year have expanded presidential immunity for official acts and allowed partial enforcement of some orders, but also blocked efforts like withholding food stamps during government shutdowns. Many other cases, 20 or more, are expected to reach the Supreme Court next year. For now, the lower court's damning rebukes will be tough to reverse, given the documented record of violations. All of this legal tumult is beginning to have tangible political consequences. Recent polling shows Democrats leading Republicans 54-41 nationally, a margin that, if sustained, would portend an electoral landslide next year. None of the other states that have attempted similar redistricting are expected to succeed, further undercutting the Republican strategic playbook. Trump's standing, it turns out, is not inexhaustible. These cascading court defeats have provided focus for a growing sense that his power is not only soiled, but fundamentally fragile. Each loss makes his ability to ram through a reactionary agenda less tenable, sapping the energy and enthusiasm of his base, exposing fissures among Republican lawmakers, and further eroding public confidence. The erosion isn't just legal or electoral. It extends into Congress, with notable Republican defections symbolized by the recent vote over the Epstein Files investigation. Despite the administration's closure of ranks, insisting along with Pam Bondi that the files can't be released due to a supposed ongoing investigation into Democrats, public and congressional skepticism is mounting fast. Few are buying the administration's excuses. The cover story that only Democrats are under investigation and therefore transparency must be delayed indefinitely has fallen flat. This new wrinkle, paired with the growing list of legal defeats, is creating real momentum for accountability. Under the stress, Trump's conduct has become even more erratic. Just this week, he accused Democratic congresspeople of sedition and suggested that unspecified action must be taken. He then suggested that death sentences would be appropriate. These are not the statements of a president anchored in constitutional restraint or democratic norms, or even insanity. They are the ravings of someone increasingly cornered, desperate to redefine reality, punish enemies, and hold off the day of reckoning. This desperation isn't lost on his supporters, many of whom are starting to hedge, equivocate, or even jump ship as his power slips. It takes an especially committed loyalist to ignore the writing on the wall when their champion is losing so badly, so frequently, and with such undisguised arrogance. What does this all lead up to? It's a repudiation, not just of Donald Trump the man, but of Trumpism as governing doctrine. The courts, buoyed by judges with a renewed sense of mission, are reasserting constitutional boundaries. Voter suppression has been halted, at least temporarily, by judges willing to look at the facts. Administrative lies and contempt for process are being punished. Cronyism and incompetence are being exposed. And the country, watching all of this unfold, is losing its appetite for the chaos and damage that flowed, unchecked for too long. Faith in the ultimate restoration of the rule of law is not a sentimental hope. It is increasingly justified by events. Trump's tendency to overreach may finally be leading to the kind of undoing that only comes from an accumulation of defeats that cannot be spun, avoided, or overturned. The end may not be immediate or even especially satisfying, but this moment is undeniably a turning of the tide. As the defeats pile up, what matters most is not simply that Trump loses, but these losses, unlike so many others, are likely to stand. For once, the system is holding, and for every believer in the law, democracy, and simple accountability, that counts as genuine progress. This has been America's Fractured Politics. Please keep the faith, and please know that sooner or later, this nightmare will end.